Let's take a look one more time at this video here. So when I look at it, what would be my first assets I need to create? Well, I think the face of the clock is probably the most basic element here, and we should start from there. Okay, so let's create a new composition. I'm going to create it inside my pre-comps folder. Click on the new comp icon, rename it, clock face. Let's take a look at the settings here. The size HDTV 1080 1920 preset is pretty good. Usually work with this because it's almost like a standard these days, but I'd like to make it smaller just for the sake of the performance of my system right now. So I'm going to lower it to the lower size of the HDTV resolution, which is 720. This is good. Another thing is I would like to change the aspect ratio of this composition. Instead of 16 by 9, I'm going to make it 1 by 1, like a square, because what I want to create right now is just a circle asset. By deselecting this aspect ratio option, I can now freely change the size of my composition without affecting the other dimension. So this is good. Clicking OK, and now I'm ready to start to design this circle. Something to keep in mind, as long as I don't have any layer selected in my timeline, and in this case I don't, because I still don't have any layer in my timeline yet, and if I go to the shape tool, it's going to create a shape layer. Otherwise, if you click on this tool while you have some layer selected, it would create a mask. In this case, we want a shape layer. Let's take a look here. Those are shape layer properties, and we'll play with those later. For now, let's just change the shape mode to the ellipse. And another thing I want to do, I'm going to switch on title save here. That way I have this little crosshair that indicates the middle of the composition. I will need that to start to draw a circle from the middle instead of from the side. As a default, when you start to draw a circle, it always draws it from the corner. In order to make it go from the middle, you have to press a command and start to grow from the middle. While you're still doing it, also press down Shift. Then you know that the circle will keep its 1-to-1 proportions. Okay, that is looking pretty good. I'm going to just make it big enough so it stretches almost to the edges of our composition. The color properties of the shape will be carrying over from whatever you draw before. In this case, I didn't draw any shape yet, so I think as a default it comes as a white stroke and a red solid. Let's actually change that. We don't need any strokes. I'm going to press on a stroke word here, the stroke options, and just change from this menu to none. Change it to none and click OK. When I take a look at the animation here, the face has a little bit of a degradation. So why don't we actually try to do the same thing? So first of all, let's go to the settings. I'm going to click the word fill, and from the menu I'm going to choose the radial gradient. The problem is the gradient is really small, so we will need to increase the size of the gradient first. You won't be able to really work with the gradient when the shape tool is active. You have to change it to the selection tool. As soon as you do that, you start to see this little handle. If for some reason you still don't see it, it means that your shape layer is not selected. So then just make sure that you select your ellipse and you're in the selection tool. Then I'm going to now play with this. Just make it bigger so it goes all the way to the end of the circle here. Okay, good. So the next thing, the color. The color is a little bit too dramatic, and in this video, and the gradient is kind of brownish. So in order to change the actual colors of the gradient, now we're going to click on this little box, which is the fill color options. So let's click on this color and just play with the value of it, make it a little bit more like a light brown. You can also like play with the midpoint, increasing the dark or light values. You know, something around here. I think it's pretty good. So click OK. Okay, our circle is almost ready. I want to make sure that this shape is really at the center of our composition. And for that, we'll need to go into the ellipse transform properties. There are two transform properties right now because the shape itself has its own transform properties. I'm going to just increase the size of the timeline. So here we have transform properties of the layer. We are not concerned with this. I haven't changed any position of the layer and I don't want to. But I want to make sure it's the position of the circle. And that's where I'm going to go into the shape transform properties. Here we have again a position property, because the position value of the shape itself is different from the position of the layer. Here, in order to center the shape, all I just need to do is just zero this out. So the 0 and 0, you know, whatever value you had there, they need to be exactly at 0, 0 to make it precisely in the center. The last thing we need to do is to bring that paper texture here. So let's go over to our project panel and bring in the asset into our composition. There are several ways to do it. You can basically just drag and drop into the comp panel or into the timeline panel. I'm just going to use the shortcut, which is command slash. If I use the shortcut, I know that my asset is placed right in the center of my composition. And as long as I'm still in the selection tool, now I can just increase the size of the paper by dragging it out like to the edge of the composition window. We will need to cut out the paper and make it a circle. Right now it's just covering the entire area. We'll need to do that by using a track mattes. The track mattes are enabling one layer to cut out the shape into another layer. And it's always the top layer that cuts out the shape. And the bottom layer is the artwork that will be visible. So we'll need to change the order of the layers here. What I'm going to do, I'll just collapse all those properties and move our circle shape up above the paper. The next thing is the track mattes are visible right now in my composition. If you don't see the track mattes, you will need to toggle the modes here. Basically, keep pressing it until you see the track mattes option in the layer properties. I have a track matte mode enabled. Next thing, from the bottom layer, I'm going to select alpha matte. That way it's using the alpha information to cut out the areas that we don't need anymore. Now the circle is cutting out the paper and we'll see the black, but actually if we switch the transparency grid, which is one of the view option in our composition panel, if I switch it on, I can see that these areas are now transparent. I'm going to go back to my timeline and take a look at this. You see, by enabling the track matte, the first thing we see is those little icons. They are telling us that those two layers are used to composite the image. And by default, After Effects also switches off the top layer to show us only the result of our composite, which is the bottom layer paper that looks like a circle now. But by doing that, we lost the gradient, and we want to bring it back. So let's click and enable that top layer, and now it covers our paper, but we can simply fix that by changing the compositing mode to merge those two images together. I'm going to just switch this. This is the compositing mode here, and instead of normal, I'm going to switch it to multiply.